I named that shark Mary Lee after my mom because I thought that was going to be the last shark we'd ever touch.
Wow.
Because I was literally like standing on the bow of the Contender with like my face into the wind, talking with my dad, like planning on like, how am I going to liquidate the ship and maybe liquidate my house to cover bills. But the guys were in the back, Brett, like fishing hard every minute of day and night, trying to make something happen for us. And then we caught that Mary Lee there at the end of the trip, and I thought it would be the last shark we touched. So named the shark Mary Lee after my mom. The tracker had just started, and then Mary Lee proceeded to cruise down the East Coast and like stick her nose in almost every bay and river and estuary, and the entire eastern seaboard of the United States fell in love with Mary Lee the shark, and it saved OCEARCH.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Tom Rowland Podcast, brought to you by Starbright. And today we have another part of our series with Burnowin of Anglers Unite. And that is where we explore different things about how anglers can actually unite together to move the needle and make a big change for the future, ensuring that our kids and grandkids have lots of places to fish and lots of fish to fish for. So we have done a number of these Anglers Unite, and I really like this series. I hope you do as well. I'd love to hear from you. You can send me an email at podcast@Saltwater Experience, or you could text 305-930-7346. Let me know your thoughts, and if you have some other subjects that you'd like for us to cover, places where you've seen anglers unite to move the needle and actually make big changes. Today, we're bringing on someone that I've known for a long time, and you've probably known him too. You've probably been following this individual for a long time. My familiarity with Chris Fischer started with his show that was called Offshore Adventures. It was on ESPN. It was a fantastic show about kind of the yacht fishing lifestyle, mostly on the West Coast. It's a great show. And he expanded that out and did another show called Wanna Go Fishing, another called Ocean Hunter, and really he was doing great with the television. And he did, I think, 180 different episodes of Offshore Adventures. And then Chris made a change, a pivot. And that pivot was to OCEARCH. And OCEARCH is, you take ocean, you take research, you put them together. It's research about the ocean. That's his organization. And they started tagging white sharks, great white sharks. It was considered impossible. And it was considered, if not impossible, extremely hard to do. The scientists were having a very hard time doing it because they didn't have the finances to get it done or the know-how to get it done. Chris comes in with fishing knowledge, Captain Brett McBride, and also a vessel that was designed kind of as a scientific vessel, the OCEARCH vessel. They were able to do this successfully, and we're going to hear the whole story from Chris. And I really enjoyed having him on the podcast. This one goes for 2 hours, and we talk the whole time. And if you're a fan of great white sharks, you definitely want to listen to this. If you're a fan of Chris Fischer, you definitely want to listen to this one. And if you're a fan of his Captain Brett McBride, which has been with him the whole time and very instrumental in much of the success that they've had with catching the great white sharks, tagging them, and being able to repeat this over and over again in many different fisheries. This, as I learned, is a lot more than tagging great white sharks. It's a lot more than that. There's a lot more that goes into it, and there's a lot more in the future. I'm really pleased to welcome back my friend Chris Fischer onto the podcast, and here we go.
Hey, I'm Chris Fischer, the founder of OCEARCH, and this is the Tom Rowland Podcast.
Chris, how are you, man?
I'm good. Good. Great to see you. It's been a while.
I know, probably since an iCast sometime before you started OCEARCH. I mean, I remember watching all of your shows, Offshore Adventures, Want to Go Fishing. You had a spear fishing show too. What was the spear?
Yeah, back in the day, Ocean Hunter.
Yeah, Ocean Hunter. That's right. I mean, you had great shows. And we'd see you at iCast in Miami and places like that. And then you made this big change for OCEARCH.
Yeah,
Tell me about that.
Well, Offshore Adventures, funny, the founding of Offshore Adventures was in the late 90s. And, I grew up in Kentucky, a passionate fisherman. I was chasing fish and frogs around the woods every day after school. And then my parents bought a condo down on Marco Island, Florida, around 1970. And so then they started taking us down there all the time. And my passion for fishing just kind of evolved and continued into the ocean space, never losing the love and passion for the freshwater space. It's just like, I love it all. I'm a fisherman. I'm not a tuna fisherman or a tarpon fisherman or a fly fisherman or whatever. I'll fish in a puddle if you want, And it's just about the water. The water is so magic. And it became my place of kind of peace at a very, very young age. Like we were fishing hard, in fourth, fifth grade. And then, started fly fishing hard around sixth grade and really was mostly chasing fish around up in Kentucky with the fly rod and little creeks and things, smallmouth and largemouth. And so that passion was always there. And then there's this one moment I don't really talk about too much. I mean, we have so much time, right? So I'm just, you can cut it out if you want. My parents were amazing, right? I was blessed with two world-class parents. And back around 1978, 79, they got a motorhome around 1980 maybe, got a motorhome in Louisville, Kentucky, and they picked me up from fourth grade, and we drove that motorhome all the way to Alaska and back, and got back like right before fifth grade started.
That's awesome.
And all they did that whole way, I had some older brothers who had gone up to Kodiak and were working the summer jobs to make money for college, spending money at the canneries. And they'd been doing that for years because they could go up there and work like 120 hours a week and make a bunch of money real fast and then have enough to get through the next college year. And so we drove up because I'm quite a bit younger than them. I'm the youngest of five. So I got, siblings 13, 12, 11, 10 years older than me. Another one 6 years older than me and me. I'm not sure, it might have been a mistake. I was kind of a straggler there in the pack. And anyway, on that trip all across the American West and up through British Columbia and the Yukon and all that, they always camped where I could fish. And I was fishing up there. The sun almost never sets.
Right.
And so I just fished and fished and fished and really got this kind of lust for what's around the next corner and how there's different people in different places. And that's a beautiful thing. And they fish different ways for different things. And I really think that trip like changed my life.
I'm sure it did.
I mean, I remember it, still today. And I was young, I was like 10.
But you also had like it sounds like your brothers. I mean, they had quite a sense of adventure too. I mean, they're Kodiak, Alaska, and then you're going to go there by road.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like a serious trip from.
Yeah, I know. We drove the Alcan Highway. It was gravel, and the Cassiar Highway, which was even more intense, for 1,000 miles or whatever. You know what I mean? Yeah. We were gone for 3 months and change. And we got to Haines, Alaska, which was, I think, as close as we could get by land. And that's where the ferries went out to Kodiak. And they came back and we all met up there. And, of course, I was catching Dolly Varden on the beach and my dad was barbecuing it up and they were drinking cold beers and I was fishing till, I couldn't stand up anymore.
I know. The first time I ever saw that, I went to a trip to Reindeer Lake in Saskatchewan, and I had never been far enough north where the sun didn't go down. I'm like 17 years old, and like you, I just fished all night long, all night. I mean, my dad's like, "You're going to need to go to sleep." I'm like, "What? Like, why? The sun's out. You can fish."
And back then you could, right? You know, you could rally around as a kid.
Of course. Yeah.
You know, and it was, so that was amazing, you know, but my dad's super entrepreneurial, serial entrepreneur. You know, he was the only kid coming out of the west end of Louisville in his family that got to go to college, and he got to go on a golf scholarship. So that was really his breakout. He was a scratch golfer when he was 14 because he grew up shagging balls and at Swanee Golf Course in Louisville, Kentucky, and he got a golf scholarship to the University of Florida.
Wow.
From Louisville, Kentucky. And so that was, you know, and then he had to join the Air Force for the food. So that kind of brought our family beginning coming down to Florida back in the day. That would have been the 50s.
Yeah.
He was on the golf team. They won a couple national championships. I think, you know, he's in the UF Hall of Fame, I believe.
That's awesome.
And so anyway, so we started a small family business in our garage when I was about 12 or 13 years old, and it was in the in the ice and beverage equipment space. And so my dad was always a serial entrepreneur. He was serving on helping the state of Kentucky kind of operate their business for Governor John Y. Brown, and he founded this little bankrupt company. My brothers kind of were coming out of college, and I was cleaning the toilets and sweeping the floors, and we ended up over time developing the first self-serve soda machine, you know, like the Big Gulp machine where you get ice and then in the middle and then soda on the side. When I was little, you only got it from behind the counter. It was like there was no self-serve.
Right.
And that was back. We also developed the first machine where you press a button, it puts ice in a bucket, you know, versus way back in the day when it was just you could scoop it out and anything could get
like
in
what
there.
You see in hotels?
Hotels, yeah.
And so
I remember once we were about to go bankrupt and Opryland ordered like 15 or 20 machines from us and kept us alive. And so then, it ended up becoming this thing that was beverage equipment for Coke and Pepsi. So I studied international business, focusing on Asia and the Pacific Rim at the University of Indiana and the National University of Singapore. And then when I came out of school, started managing our business in Asia.
Wow. Were you in Singapore?
I was living in Southern California and commuting 2 weeks of every month to Asia.
Wow.
And so that's when I moved out to Southern California in like 1990. So it's this really entrepreneurial thing. And my mom was always into service. You know, she had us delivering Meals on Wheels. So kind of really got that feeling you can only get from serving.
Right.
You know, got that in my life at a young age with this entrepreneurial thing. And so in 1997, my older brothers, they sold the business. And so I was, 29 years old, and I thought, I was going to be there the rest of my life. And it wasn't enough for me to retire or anything like that, but it was enough to try to think about what do you want to do next?
And what was that? The TV?
And so I was laying on my couch. God bless Jose. He became such a good friend. I was laying on a couch in Newport Beach, California. I'd been living there for maybe 8 or 9 years. And I was watching the Spanish Fly in the morning out west. And he opened the show and he caught a 50-pound tuna and then he let it go.
Nice.
And I'm like, damn it, Jose, nobody lets the first 50-pound tuna go, right? That one goes home. And I don't know if you remember back in the day, there was a lot of pressure for this, catch and release was kind of like the tidal wave of it was starting to make regular people who go out and fish within the limits for their family feel a little awkward.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, wait a minute, that's not cool. And I had been fishing hard so I was 2 weeks in Asia, 2 weeks on Newport Beach. And so in my off 2 weeks, man, I was hammering the Pacific there, right? I was working all night on Asia time, fishing all day. A lot of charter captains there really took me under their wing and really started to kind of teach me what was going on. Cause I was just a kid who came out from Kentucky, and had some time on the water in the Gulf of Mexico. And then suddenly I'm in like this ocean where once you leave the harbor, dude, you're in the giant open ocean.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of places to hide, So they really took me under their wings. John McCarty in particular, Finn Fever, he's still a very close friend. And then, Anthony Shea was around back then. We were all fishing together back in the day in the 90s out of Newport, and we're all buddies.
Yeah.
We'd see each other along the tour, at Catalina or down in Cabo or whatever. So I'm laying there and Jose lets the first 50-pounder go. And I'm like, what am I going to do next? I'm like, God damn, I'm starting a show and I'm going to take my family out fishing. And we're going to try to pour the world's ocean, this whole family fishing vibe into people's lives. But we're going to take one. And we're going to show people how to handle it, and we're going to eat it, and we're going to celebrate that. We'll let the rest go.
Yeah.
But it's okay for like families to go out and catch fish and bring it home and eat it. Especially recreational fishermen are so willing to be managed.
Yes.
Right. Like, you know what I mean? So, they're playing inside the ballpark, So anyway, I really started Offshore Adventures at that time because I was passionate about it. And I had a boat that, when we went fishing out there, we'd go fishing for like 2 weeks because, we didn't do this day boat thing so much. It was more of a yacht fisher type of vibe, that Southern California yacht fisher where you kind of live on the boat and you fish on the boat. It's not perfect for fishing, but it's fishable, but it's great because you can live on it because it's so far to get anywhere. You might have to stay there a week. So you're trying to hybrid all that,
Mm-hmm.
And it's still my favorite type of boat to this day is the California yacht fisher. When you can get into the lifestyle of cruising those islands and using Baja and the Sea of Cortez, and you can enjoy what that region of the world has to offer, I think it's probably the best in the world as far as, big moving around. It's not so great for zipping in and out every day.
Right. If you got the right boat.
It's it's kind of for that area, and that lifestyle. And so when we would go out, we would fish and then we would free dive and then we'd go to the village and then we'd cook something up. And that's how we went fishing. And there was nothing like that, really in the space. And also at that time, there was really not really many women in the space. So my ex-wife, Melissa, was really kind of one of the female pioneers in the fishing space. And then the gourmet galley in that show was really one of the very early catch and cooks.
I know. Yep.
And so that was just the lifestyle. And so I decided to try to start that show, and I bit the bullet. I did a time buy with a little bit I had to try to get the next thing going. And then I went out to sell it. And at that time it was Red Lobster who came through huge in the early years.
Nice.
And then right behind them was Costa and Yeti, right when they founded. Those guys have been funding us since 25 years.
Yeah.
So that was just an awesome, Offshore Adventures was basically moving the boat between Southeast Alaska and the Panama Canal on like a 2-year loop.
Yeah. But you had like lots
awesome.
I remember you fishing with George Bush on that show.
Yeah. And so, what I started to get really interested in, with the background that I had from my father and my mother and my passion for the water, first it was just kind of chasing that passion. And then, all of their influence began to kind of trickle into the path and the journey of shaping it. One was the service component from my mom. Mm-hmm. So, I joined the board of the Billfish Foundation. That's where I began to learn about ocean science, which is ultimately led to OCEARCH, and then, the policy component became more and more important to me because, if you don't affect that, then you're just, barking out there, making noise. And,
how did you get more involved in the policy component? Through the board of the Billfish Foundation?
Yeah, through the board of the Billfish Foundation. And then, the Bushes wanted to do a redfish initiative in the Chesapeake Bay, a regulation to look after the redfish. They wanted an outlet for it. So, they reached out, and of course we were thrilled to participate in that and visit him in the Oval Office. And then, really began to see, how can we connect the dots to make the path from when you're on the water to when you're at the policy and the pathway in between, from catching the fish to tagging the fish to collecting the data to then the peer-reviewed paper to then the relationship with Capitol Hill, and then ultimately, hopefully, if you're really starting to get things done now and again, you end up, in the White House. So I think it was about, just trying to make sure we had a positive impact. I mean, even back in the day when Offshore Adventures, I don't know if you remember, I used to end that show with get out, discover the world offshore, and be a responsible steward of the sea. I really wanted to bring a stewardship conversation in, and everyone gets that now, but back in 1998, people weren't really talking that way,
right?
So much.
Yeah, because and also the ocean and the sea seems so huge at that time that it's like, yeah, you might be able to, operate catch and release in one of these lakes inshore, and that's inland, and that might make a big difference. But the ocean just seemed like such a giant place that
we couldn't affect it.
Yeah, like we couldn't affect it. But you saw that we have, and what you've done so far is that we have. One of the things that we talk about here a lot are how anglers can unite again around a certain objective and actually make a difference. Do you remember situations like before even OCEARCH that like, well, with the redfish and the mullet in Florida and some other ones, we certainly have, but I was wondering if you knew.
Well, there's obviously, like the 94 banning of the inshore gill nets in Florida, when the people of Florida came together to vote that in. That was the people taking back the ocean. That was minimizing special interest, so that it could be by the people for the people. That was a historic move that inspired other areas to remove gill nets. And later in this conversation, I want to talk to you about what's going on in Florida and on the East Coast. And because, we're in the midst of the great return to abundance right now. People, I don't even think understand that our oceans now, we're at abundance levels maybe we haven't seen since the 50s or the 40s right now.
Well, I'm really interested in talking to you about that, because we that's a common theme. But let's put
But anyway, back to Offshore Adventures. So I started that for those reasons. And while I was doing that, I joined the board of the Billfish Foundation. I met the scientists who study the billfish, and started to see, they were trying to do studies, and it'd be like, well, how many tags have you gotten out? And they said, oh, I've been fishing for a couple of years. I've got out 6 tags. I'm like, well, man, I was just in that location filming Offshore Adventures with Brett for 12 days, and we let 30 go. And everyone's complaining about the challenge in the ocean space is data deficit.
Right.
But we didn't have our best fishermen helping our best scientists collect our best data as efficiently as possible. Because these scientists, they have no boats, no money, and can't catch.
Right. I mean,
but they're amazing once they have a data set to turn it into a leverageable, peer-reviewed, published paper.
That's exactly
and
right.
Then I knew these other guys who could catch anything, but they couldn't write the paper.
Right.
So I'm just kind of like, well, why don't we get the guys who can catch with the guys who write the papers, and we'll write a lot more papers a lot faster and affect the ocean sooner.
Yes.
And so we started doing that in the billfish space, and we could see we could explode the rate of data collection 30-fold just by bringing the world-class practical and academic together on a common vision of, let's solve this puzzle so our great grandkids can see these fish. Who's not on board with that?
Right. Exactly.
And so I started everywhere Offshore Adventures went. I started to see it doesn't cost me any more money to throw a scientist in the bunk. If I'm in the Sea of Cortez, we'll bring the sailfish person. They can get their data, and we started just kind of exploding little data sets much more rapidly forward all through that region between Southeast Alaska and Panama. And while I was doing that, one of those persons was a white shark scientist.
Okay.
It was a guy who studied black marlin down on the Hannibal Bank in Panama, and we were down there shooting Offshore Adventures. We were kind of one of the early shows that kind of showed people places like Tropic Star and Los Sueños, and those kind of places, introduced those to America really, because they were kind of coming up, and we were cruising in there around 2000 or so, And he said, hey, man, it was about 2006, 2007. He goes, this paper just published, we're down to 9% of our large sharks. And if we don't fix the shark thing, we're going to lose all our fish.
Wow.
And I'm like, take me through that, man. I know I help you out on this billfish thing, but I'm not really, people who go shark fishing is for people who don't know how to go fish.
Right.
Yeah. Well, so Brett and I were not very interested in the conversation,
Right.
And we literally just drove in from live baiting 40-pound tuna for 800-pound black marlin. It's like shark fishing.
Yeah.
He said, "No, you don't understand, man. If we don't get these big sharks back, those billfish are not going to be there." And I was like, I remember just simply kind of saying to him, like, so this Offshore Adventures life, if we don't fix this shark thing, are my kids going to be able to live the Offshore Adventures life? Are they going to be able to go out and catch fish sandwich? And he's like, no. And I was like, well, who's doing the work? We're helping you on the marlin. He's like, nobody. They're too big. We've never been able to get our hands on one and leverage the latest technology to figure out where they mate, where they give birth. We have no idea how to manage back the system manager of the ocean.
Right.
And I was like, well, that's a problem.
Before we go just any further, so when he's saying you got to fix this shark problem, otherwise everything is going to go down. You're not going to have the billfish anymore. How, like, why?
Yeah, that's what I asked. I was like, so how's that work?
Yeah, how does that work?
So, like, in particular in your region, right, if you have healthy shark populations, every evening when the squid migrate to the surface, the sharks keep them down. They put a lot of pressure on the squid.
Mm-hmm.
If the sharks aren't there when those squid come up every night, they decimate all the fry of every species in the open ocean. They eat every baby dorado, baby tuna, baby wahoo, baby everything until they're all gone, because there's no pressure on them to create the space for those fry to get to where they need to be to survive.
Okay, that makes sense.
And up in the northern latitudes where the where all the seals are.
Mm-hmm.
One white shark cruising up and down a beach, keep 1,000 seals pinned on the beach till they're almost starving, and then they just get a little bit and hop out. If the white sharks aren't there, they just decimate all the menhaden, the stripers, the lobster, the cod. They just wipe it out.
Okay.
So really, these larger sharks are the guardians of our fish stocks because they affect the behavior of everything else in the system, which creates the space for each component of the system. They are the conductor of the orchestra.
Yeah.
A balance keeper. And then you're down to 9% of them. You got your squid. When you're cruising around and you see big squid balls pushing up on the surface during the daytime, you have a major problem.
That should never happen.
They're up there decimating our bait.
Right. But
and all the fry. No, they're supposed to be down during the day because they're terrified of the sharks that are putting pressure on them.
Right.
Otherwise, so when you start to see things like that, you have real problems. When people are going to using things like fads to enhance fishing, you have real problems. Fads are what you use to catch and kill the very last things in a system. And are banned in most parts of the world.
Yeah.
So, we're seeing all this as we move around on Offshore Adventures. Our perspective is, we're seeing the commercial people in all these various countries we're going through. We're seeing who's winning, who's losing, the kind of management, race or situation across the Pacific coast. And that's impacting us a lot. And at that time, Brett and I had started having kids.
Mm-hmm.
We had done 188 Offshore Adventures plus all those other shows. And we're like, man, maybe this is a chance to make a global impact because there's 9 white shark populations around the world. And if you could crack the code on all 9 of those and manage them back, you could affect global abundance. And I began to see a glimmer of hope that maybe we could do that. And once you see even a glimmer,
so
you're done.
Yeah. So what does that look like?
You're going to give everything to.
Do you have to get Brett on board, or is he kind of right lockstep with you?
And in the beginning, he didn't want to. He wanted to help him, but because the scientists just came to us and said, "I got this permit to Guadalupe. Could you take me out and maybe try to get one of these things in the lift, so I can put this new modern tag on it?" There was no gig.
Right.
And I just said, yeah, we'll take you out there and try it. You said maybe it could make a big difference.
And so you were thinking that you would do it with your Offshore Adventures boat?
No, I had the ship at that time. I had just bought the ship, and I was really struggling to kind of make Offshore Adventures work on the ship because it just really wasn't Offshore Adventures anymore. It had gone to much more like global and commercial and scaled.
Yeah.
It wasn't so yachty and gourmet galley,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Right.
I was really found myself in a difficult situation. We were in Penis Bay and we were shooting, and I felt half in and half out. Like I couldn't figure out how to make it work. And I remember I was in Penis Bay and I went up to do my interview. You know, you go shoot for 12 days and then you wrap it into 3 shows. So you got to sit down and do an interview. And at the end of the final interview, I ended it and told the shooters in that moment that this was the final and last show, and to thank the audience.
Wow.
Because it just hit me when I was there, like I'm never going to get anything amazing done if I'm half in and half out.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to make Offshore Adventures, have this ship, have this, and it's got to make a move.
Right. What is that like when you decide that? Are you scared? Yeah, I would imagine, because you got this really popular show. Not that many shows go 180 episodes, and so now you're feeling compelled. Do you think that's from the service component from your mom that you're feeling compelled to move in that direction? Or is it that you have a duty to the ocean? Or is it that you're just more interested in that? Maybe you had done Offshore Adventures to death and it was time to move on. I don't know.
Yeah, so I always had a dream when I started. I really looked at what Offshore Adventures like, and I'm going to talk a little about my dreams. I don't say it much because I don't know. Sometimes, you can say it's your dream and some people can laugh at your dream, and so when I started Offshore Adventures, I was kind of like, why aren't people talking about the ocean more? You got to remember, this is like 1997, 1998. And you'd be like, come in from fishing or whatever, and you'd go see your buddies like, man, I saw this epic thing, but there was a fucking turtle wrapped up in a net, and we cut that thing out, and I was be like, whatever, dude, let's go party, And it's like, wow, people aren't interested. And I was kind of like, why am I so interested? And I was a passionate fan of Cousteau. He was one of my childhood heroes. And so in those early days of Offshore Adventures, there was some sort of underlying dream of an exploration component and more of a Cousteau pursuit, because he was my hero and he was a big centrist voice in the ocean space. He wasn't like a lot of these fringy derelicts we deal with on both sides of an issue, right? He was pretty centrist, right? And that's where we all need to be. But when he died, he had no plan for after him. The Cousteau Society just went away and the ocean lost its voice.
Yeah.
And that's why nobody was talking about the ocean. And that's why, like, one of the original goals of Offshore Adventures was to pour the world's oceans into people's lives at a scale unseen since Cousteau. I didn't know how I was going to do it. You got to shoot big, right? And then I started Offshore Adventures because of my area of passion and a lot of experience was in the fishing side of things. And so when we went through this process and found out about the sharks and the scientists asked for my help, I was like, ooh, and I thought back to those kind of entrepreneurial lessons my dad is like, Chris, if you want to get into a space that you're passionate about, it's not always like exactly how you want it. You got to get in there, you got to work, you got to like just be observant, right? Because just you get in there, opportunities will come up, right? So you can't like expect to get the end with the first move. You got to grind and earn it,
Yeah.
And so when they came and asked about the shark thing, I'd be lying if I didn't see like, oh, wow, here's a pivot that could take us from fisherman to explorer. Which is a much, much bigger audience, right? It's a global ocean audience. And then at that time around then, I started benchmarking Cousteau's life. Like, okay, he led 22 expeditions. Maybe if we could hold it together for 22, we could maybe become the Cousteau of our time. We could maybe, really more so than becoming that, is become the booming voice from the middle. The data-driven centrist voice that's coming from the results of both the fisherman and the scientist, the commonsensical middle.
Yeah.
And try to create so much inertia around that we could pull the fringes in or make them moot, so that we could make these incremental policy steps forward. You never get everything you want, but if you're always making a little incremental step forward, those little inches really add up over time. An inch is a cinch, a yard is hard.
Right.
So let's collect the inches. And what the fringes do is they prevent you from catching those inches, because they're all or nothing. And then you can't even make like a move forward that improves things 15%. Right. Hell, you do that 3 or 4 years in a row, you're rolling, yes. Right? So it really was about, there was all these things going on, in the middle of this journey that, these opportunities come and you choose if you're going to take them or not. One of them was getting the ship. The gentleman sold me that ship for probably a quarter of what it was worth, because he knew I wanted to try to do something great for the ocean. I never would have been here without him. Nice. There's a lot of people like that along the way.
Yeah.
So we pivoted in 2007. And we still made Offshore Adventures for like another year or so. And we took them out on that expedition. Actually, we still made Offshore Adventures. We took out the first shark expedition in 2007 as just a gift to see if it was possible to do it, which is all the stuff that's being released on the app right now in the Sharkives, all the olds with our commentary.
I watched that in preparation for this, and I had seen all that stuff before, but forgotten about it.
Yeah.
To a fisherman, you're looking at that and you're like, that thing just mangled the biggest circle hook I've ever seen in my life. Yeah. And it just mangled it. And then you look back on it and you guys are just like, I guess this is how you're supposed to do it. That's one of the things I wanted to talk about is like, you can look back on that stuff now and I'm sure you laugh because you're like, look at what we were trying to do, but nobody had done that before.
Yeah.
And so what changed to make it possible? Obviously you had to work out the hook and the leader and the
you need
all that stuff.
Yeah, but first you need a Captain Brett McBride.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, you need a very special salty guy. One of those, we all know there's a few of them around the world, that are operating at a different level of connection with the ocean, can basically do anything. When we make Offshore Adventures, we'd be cutting something together and we'd be like, oh man, we just need one little dive scenario with a whatever for a food fish. It'd be like, oh, I can do that. Throw the camera guys in the car, drive out, swim out off a rock, make a drive, shoot the thing, come back. Like anything, anytime. Brett, I need you to catch a 4,000 pound white shark off Guadalupe. Okay, Chris, so you got to have some salty people that, also have their heart in the right spot. Like Brett could be working on any shiny yacht and any super fancy resort in the world making bank, but he chooses to fish for everyone's children.
That's awesome.
And so because it all starts with the practical fisherman. It all starts, on the water. If you don't catch, there is no data.
Right.
And so now there
was no data, right?
There was no data. So, right, that's why they were stuck on these giant sharks. They'd never been able to handle them. They'd never been able to use these, real-time tags to know where they go.
Right.
And so we took them out in 2007 just as a kind of a gift to try to help them out. And then that turned out to become the way. And it turned into 30 hours on the National Geographic Channel of what was called Sharkmen.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the pioneering of the method of, how do you catch these large animals, get them into a lift. It gives the scientists safe access for about 15 minutes, conduct research, and then let them go. And we cut our teeth on that. That's all. We're releasing 3 new chapters a week, all year long.
That's cool.
Of the origin story of OCEARCH with our commentary right now. So that stuff's fresh in my mind. I just went through it too.
Yeah.
So that was amazing, right? Because people said it was impossible. I remember driving out, it's 200 miles out to Guadalupe from Ensenada or San Diego there, a little more. And we didn't know what was going to happen, And I remember falling back on like my dad and my mom, don't get overwhelmed by the scale of the task, Chris. Just keep inching forward, an inch is a cinch, a yard is hard, and then you're just pounding in, and you got to have the stamina, the tenacity that you just absolutely refuse to lose or give up.
Right.
And then just keep inching forward and you'll get there. And I remember like stuff like that going through my mind. And I remember a little bit of fear, but as we got out there and went through it, you can see it evolved. It evolved actually pretty quickly in hindsight, right? Like every time we got our asses kicked by a giant shark, there was a radical incremental leap forward in the approach to the next animal to eliminate those, weaknesses.
What was the thing that you like eliminated that made it like, okay, we can do this? Was it the hook seemed like it was a big problem.
The hook was a problem that first year, maybe even the second year. But what happened with the hook, we went to Mustad. I got to give them credit. We went to Mustad and said, hey, well, we're doing this research project. Of course, we had a relationship with them from Offshore Adventures. Mm-hmm. And they're breaking these hooks. And then Mustad just took that very personally.
Well, that circle hook is always in the Mustad booth. To this day, the circle hook is in the Mustad booth with the chain on it. Like they always bring that.
Yeah, and they were just like, we will make you a hook that nothing in the ocean can break.
And that
we are Mustad, and we will do that.
Proved to be a harder task than anyone.
No, they pulled it off. They've even got them down now into some. We use much smaller hooks now that are like 5x the strength of a standard hook. Mm-hmm. So that's really evolved. And, that was a game changer. The other thing that was a game changer really was the understanding of the buoys and how they work and the sequencing of buoys, and then getting the buoys right up near the face of the shark, because once you have a buoy near the face of anything on the water, you own it, because if it tries to drop its head, it can't, and then it can't get its tail on it, so it was really interesting. We were going out there hand lining, and it was evolving fast, and we were trying to get them into the cradle, and they were going under, and we couldn't get them. They don't want to go into the cradle.
Right.
And so Jimmy the Kid, great, one of these world-class leader guys out of Hawaii, super instinctual, natural, just fisherman, water guy. He was like, yeah, bro, we just need to get a buoy on its head, when we're fighting the swordfish back home, sometimes I just put a buoy on there and take a rest. Once I get the buoy on its head, I own that thing. And we were like, that's it. And it was really leaning back on a lot of ancient Portuguese fishing tan lining techniques.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that people don't understand is Brett has the skill and the talent. He can disassemble any rope and reweave anything back together to make everything like super custom and smooth. So we can fabricate the things we need. We don't have to buy them.
Right.
Because he's got those like old school things that they really don't teach kids much anymore.
Right.
And, so we began to sort it out. And once we had a system to where we could eventually over time get the buoys down to the shark's face, we could then get anything in the cradle. If it was a 4,000-pound shark, you had 4 buoys. If it was a 1,000-pound shark, you needed 1, and that was the big breakthrough. That, along with, there was a meeting that was in the beginning breakthroughs. There's been other breakthroughs along the way that even happened years later. But that helped us kind of get some things going out there in Guadalupe, to where ultimately I think we tagged about 27 sharks out there over a few years. And that really cracked the code on these white sharks using the Sea of Cortez and Baja and Southern California and all that sort of stuff back in the day. We were even catching the juvenile white sharks off San Onofre in Malibu in 2009 and tagging them. Everybody knows about the baby white sharks on the beaches of California now. We were tagging them in 2009. And I remember after that, I had a meeting with the mayor. I was at the Kentucky Derby, and I was with the mayor of LA. And I told him, I said, hey, man, in about 10 years, you're going to be covered up in baby white sharks. Just you should know that for your planning. They're coming back, and that's the nursery. And, it's fantastic to see, right? And, sure enough, give the ocean a little bit of time and a little bit of space, and she heals right up,
That's right. That's right. And so when did you start to move to other parts of the world?
Well, we started in Guadalupe, and we worked in Guadalupe and pioneered all the work from 2007 to 2010 between the Farallones and Guadalupe, the Sea of Cortez, and Southern Cal. So that was kind of like 3 or 4 years getting it going there. A whole bunch of other stuff was going on, and like how science works and the politics of science. And I was like, this is a disaster, right? Like, I took a scientist out there and we cracked the code on how to handle these animals and give them safe access. But we only did one thing. I'm like, I need like 25 more smart people here right now. I mean, my guys are putting their body parts on the line so you can stand next to this thing just out of respect for them. I mean, in the respect for the animal, like you say, our challenge is data deficit. Well, if we're doing 25 projects, aren't we getting 25 times more data?
Yeah.
So isn't that like shark first, ocean first? Like respect the beast. If we're going to catch this thing, we got to max out the opportunity.
Was that welcome or?
It said, oh, we can't do that, man. I'm trying to get ahead of all the other scientists, publish or perish, so we got to leverage this for me to get ahead. So I win the next grant.
What's your reaction to that? Like,
best I can tell is I fucking paid for everything and my guys put their body parts on the wall on the line. So we're inviting everybody. And that's when I learned, like, not everybody's in it to win it. And it's not that they're bad people. It's that they're stuck in bad systems.
Yeah.
That's what the system's rewarding. Our approach to marine biology is completely broken. So at that time, around 2009, I realized, oh, my God, I got to completely disrupt our approach to ocean research. And I can do it in a very charismatic space where everyone will watch because of the white shark. So we can then transfer that into other areas and increase the rate of learning to collect these data sets to move the system toward abundance.
Wow, that had to be a major transformative moment right there of like, it's either hope or like, oh shit, I'm not sure.
Well, a lot of both, Yeah. Well, what ended up happening, so then I started trying to build these big collaborative teams. And when I'd move into the area, the old boy or the old girl, the old guard, they would try to do everything they could to crush OCEARCH and prevent us from getting permits because they didn't want me bringing in a team of 20 scientists all coming up in the space because it would dilute their fundraising capacity.
Sure.
So you could only do that after they retired, even though they couldn't learn what we needed them to learn now.
But somebody like that is powerful enough to block you. Well,
they just use social media and then they call the agencies and, they need their comments because I got to get all these special permits.
Right.
I got like all kinds of crazy, and their old entrenched old buddy boy system and the same thing's going on there. So I'm like, oh my God, the very people that ask us to help them now are the single biggest threat to our organization.
Yeah. Wow. What a situation to find yourself in.
But I was, I felt like I was on some sort of crusade because I was doing it for the ocean. So I was ready to fight to the death. I was ready to fight to bankruptcy and to death.
They didn't expect that, maybe.
I don't know, but I was prepared for that.
Okay.
And I skirted the line a few times. So because it had to be done for our kids, man. I got no time for anybody who's not in it to win it for the ocean because they got some side agenda. I got no time. The ocean has no time. So I'll talk very straight about that.
Yeah. So the new scientists that you're bringing in, they have a whole new attitude, a whole new agenda, and they're like, we're going to work collaboratively and we're going to win this.
Well, what we were able to do is we were able to leverage the fact that the platform was the only place in the world where you could get safe access to giant white sharks. And so you could either come and collaborate, or we invited everybody. Or you could stay home and describe yourself as like a data hoarding, non-ocean first researcher and fall behind.
Yeah.
Because you won't get the data set, and they will. So we always invited the senior people to be like the chief of the expeditions and everywhere. But if they didn't want to play, we were coming because they weren't getting the work done.
Right.
Because they didn't have the ship. They didn't have a Brett McBride. They didn't have the equipment required These are big questions. These
like,
in the fishing know-how. Yeah, these are
major. And also the guts. Like I remember in that first one, the shark dives that I watched last night, it was like we kind of were all thinking, because of all the movies we've watched and everything, that like this thing might turn around and come back and eat the whole boat. Like, and you're on this big boat, it's like there's this fear and there's this, I mean, imagine what that would be if you hadn't caught a 1,000-pound black marlin before, if you've never even seen a fish like that, if you've never caught a big swordfish or something like that, or a 500-pound shark. Imagine what it would be like to go out there for a 2,000-pound shark or a 4,000-pound shark and be, just absolutely ill-equipped for that. You don't have the experience, you don't have the gear, you don't have the know-how, and it would be very scary.
Yeah, it was intimidating, and what we learned pretty quick though was very obvious. It was like, when you catch one of these things, they just want to get away, like a bluegill, like anything. Yeah, they just want to get away. So that went away pretty quick, and then over time, we got better and better at it. And as we left that region and we went down to our next big project, started down in the Revilla-Gijedos Islands, down there about 200 miles south of Cabo, which is kind of like the Galapagos of Mexico. If you've never been there, you got to go there. It's just like outrageous. Nice. And we had spent a lot of time on Offshore Adventures out there filming. And so I ended up connecting with this Dr. Pete Klimley out of UC Davis, who is a real, senior guy in the white shark space. And I called him and I'm like, hey, Pete. And he's like, I don't know if I should take this call. I don't know. Cause his buddy Barbara Block was saying we were, bad people because we had a collaborative team at the Farallons and that was her turf and that was a no-no. And I'm just like, got to get it done, and stupid non-ocean first stuff. But I'm like, Pete, come on, man. Like, let's get a bunch of people down there. Let's go put this big project around all these tiger sharks and this connectivity thing you want to do between the Revilla-Gijedos and Cocos and the Galapagos. And we can deliver this and no one else can deliver this data set. And we got to do it for the sharks, bro. And for this. And so, cause he, at that time, OCEARCH, he didn't know, like people were saying, oh, these guys, they just are in for the thrill of catching the 4,000-pound shark. They really don't care about the ocean. That's like the social media chatter from the, armchair quarterback derelicts. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, they don't understand that, like, Brett and I were just like, 3 months ago, we were like sitting in Costa Rica drinking cold beers after catching mahi and shooting some snapper. And now we're in a freezing cold metal boat, catching white sharks. Like, are you kidding, bro? You don't even understand fishing or the ocean. This is not an upgrade, right? It's the right thing to do, but it's not an upgrade, It's not. I mean, it's just not. And so, we just kind of just kept powering through it and refused to die and kept making enough breakthroughs. And then Pete Klimley came in, who was a senior guy in the United States, and he built a great team with some great scientists down throughout California, Mexico, Ecuador, and we were doing this big connectivity study because we believed that there was a highway from the Revilla-Gijedos to the Cocos, through Cocos down to the Galapagos. I think he put that team together, and that was our first real big collaborative team.
Nice.
So we started to, then at that time we might have been doing 6 projects or 7 projects. And, now we do 25 projects on every shark. And we have a team of 49 researchers getting samples from every animal we touch, at 25 different research institutions.
Wow.
Because that's ocean first. That's grandkid first, right? It's just about, it's all rise with the tide. And what we have is the practical component to actually get the sample or collect the data. They don't have that. So now we see ourselves as trying to really become like a servant of the ocean, a servant of the science community, to help them go 10 times further than they could ever go on their own in a fraction of the time.
Sure. And that's, when does it move over to like Florida and the East Coast?
So in 2000, was it 2012 when the Gulf oil spill occurred?
Yeah. I think
2011 or right around there.
Yeah.
We had just finished that project coming down with Clemley through, Mexico and Costa Rica and Ecuador that we just talked about. And I called him and I called over the biggest shark guy name I could find at the time was a gentleman named Dr. Bob Huter at Mote Marine Lab. So I called Bob. I'm like, Bob, hey man, I don't know what they can do, but there's this terrible oil spill and I have this, ship. Like, is there anything we can do to help? And he was like, yes. I need you to get that boat over here to Boca Grande. We need to get some tags and some bull sharks and some tiger sharks and some great hammerhead sharks. And we need to understand how this oil spill is affecting them. And that kind of moved it over. And Bob at Mote, he's still one of my closest friends. He ultimately really became my science mentor. And I began to talk to him about what I was finding, all these inefficiencies and how the system wasn't set up to create the abundant future. In fact, the system was the reason why we have a data deficit problem. Mm-hmm. And so we began to develop like the OCEARCH system and brought in I have a data scientist, a chief scientist who's a veterinarian, and then Bob's my chief advisor. And when we move around the world, this group assembles the scientists from all over that region, make sure they understand all the different opportunities to learn. And if they don't have the capacity to do it, we pluck one of our senior people from a different part of the world and have them come over and kind of mentor that person and do that project with them and then transfer that skill to that part of the world.
Wow.
So that we're building a base of scientists around the world that everyone can manage their own place and be the champion for their own place.
Right.
And so Bob really helped me shape these massive collaborative teams now that we really facilitate, manage, bring together, and then ultimately serve with the ship and then hold them accountable to deliver papers in a timely manner. And if they do not, we transfer the data set to someone who will, because ultimately we need that to make sure every dollar is maximized from when we start working on the water until we affect policy.
Wow.
So it's been like this, and there's all sorts of stuff. That's kind of big picture stuff. But yeah, it's been a wild ride,
I would think it's been the wildest ride. I mean, just to think that you start out by somebody asking you if you can help them catch a great white shark to these exponential increases in data and the way things are done. It's a total shakeup. I didn't realize all of that.
Total disruption of the individual approach to science.
That's
and proving that all can rise with the tide. So then what was funny was, so now we're helping all these people and there's all this data, right? And then everyone, starts fighting, who owns the data? Right? I'm like, oh my God. So I'm like, well, we paid for everything, so I guess we do. It was the first time I ever had to claim the ownership of the data so I could then give it away.
Right.
So, our scientists have a little bit, the time they need to write their papers. And then after their papers are written, those data sets, we get data requests every week from people all over the world. And then we share, if it's a legitimate science project with a person, we have a science meeting every week that reviews our data requests. And now we share those data sets with students and scientists all over the world who are constantly writing new things coming out of the data sets. But the concept of the ownership of data, everyone's holding on to their data. And I was like, no more, man. This is by the people for the people. So that's when I started the Global Shark Tracker, because that was hugely controversial in 2013 because I was showing the data.
Right. And they didn't
for the first time, the public was allowed into the inside of a science project, seeing the same thing the scientists saw.
How many people have downloaded that app?
We have about 2 million active users a month.
Everybody I know has that app. Everybody I know, wherever you go, they're like, hey, there's a great white shark right out there. I'm like, that's so cool. I mean, that has been a massive success. What has the app success and the number of people getting that app, what has that done for your progress, for your movement?
Well, we knew that was 2013, 2012, 13. We just finished tagging 40 sharks down in South Africa. So it must have been 2012 when we launched the Global Shark Tracker. And that was really to allow people into the project in real time. And, the what happened was right after it launched, our South African sharks were on it, but then we moved the ship. I thought the show had been canceled, and I thought I was going to lose the ship and go bankrupt. This was like the second or third time. This was 2012. So I had about $500,000 left over from the TV gig, and SCOML was up in Massachusetts, and a couple white sharks had just started showing up in Cape Cod around 2010, 2009, but they had no idea where they were coming from or going to at all. No idea. So I moved the ship up there in 2012, and with the last of my money, we went out and we tagged 2 sharks. We tagged this one shark named Jeannie. We named after Jeannie Clark, one of the founders of Moat. And then we named the second one Mary Lee after my mom. And I named that shark Mary Lee after my mom because I thought that was going to be the last shark we'd ever touch.
Wow.
Because I was literally like standing on the bow of the Contender with like my face into the wind, talking with my dad, like planning on like, how am I going to liquidate the ship and maybe liquidate my house to cover bills. But the guys were in the back, Brett, like fishing hard every minute of day and night, trying to make something happen for us and trying to kind of manage that and hold it together. And then we caught that Mary Lee there at the end of the trip, and I thought it would be the last shark we touched. So named the shark Mary Lee after my mom. The tracker had just started, and then Mary Lee proceeded to cruise down the East Coast and like stick her nose in almost every bay and river and estuary, and the entire eastern seaboard of the United States fell in love with Mary Lee the shark, and it saved OCEARCH.
Wow.
The big moment was, I remember when Mary Lee, we tagged her in the fall of 12, and I bounced between Florida and Park City, Utah. Mm-hmm. So I moved back and forth, and I got kids and work here and kids and work there and so forth. And so I was out here in Park City, and I think it was, like around the first of the year, it was a blizzard here, absolute blizzard. And I look on the tracker, and Mary Lee pings in. When we tagged those sharks in 2008, people said there was no white sharks in Florida at that time.
Right. Yes. I mean,
there's no white sharks in Florida.
That was the total most common thing. Meanwhile, I knew commercial fishermen that caught them different ways, and they had teeth and they had jaws, and they weren't supposed to have any of this stuff.
Yeah.
They had it. And I saw it. And I'm like, what? Like, there's a white shark out here? I mean, that was that was so outrageous, right? But meanwhile, like on social media, just yesterday, there's a white shark in Isla Mirada. I don't know if you saw that. Can you?
Oh yeah, no, we got So we're tracking too. So in 2012 when we tagged Mary Lee, we were like, "Where's this shark going to go?" People were like, "Oh, out in the middle of the Atlantic." Nobody. And then Mary Lee went straight to Florida. And I'm like, I guess we got to go look down in Florida. People are like, there's no white sharks in Florida. I'm like, well, I know there's one.
Yeah. Her
name's Mary Lee, and she's a giant one. There. Yeah.
That one off the reef. That's 130 feet of water.
Yeah. And I mean, that is their primary winter habitat. We have now know and understand that the eastern seaboard of Florida is the primary winter habitat of the white sharks, primarily between Hatteras and Canaveral.
Yeah.
But then some of them do leak down below Canaveral, occasionally go for a little walkabout in the Gulf, but then come back up and into this real primary zone, which is from the Gulf Stream, pins a cold body of water against the continent from Hatteras to Canaveral. And they live in that little cold strip of water along the coast between it and the Gulf Stream. And that is the primary winter habitat. But back then, people said there was no white sharks in Florida. And Mary Lee went and she pinged in right underneath the Jacksonville Beach Pier.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do. And I felt like I got to call somebody. So I called the Jacksonville Beach Police Department. I'm like, this is the weirdest phone call you ever got. Like, I got a 4,000-pound white shark, like right underneath the pier right now. And,
what did they say to that?
They looked at it and they was like, okay. And they went out and they closed the beach for a couple hours. And then she pinged in 3 miles off the beach and they opened it right back up. But then the entire press, the global press universe just erupted about that story. And Mary Lee had already begun to build a following. And, she really created so much awareness. Then all of a sudden we went from having like a couple 100 million viewers around the world on National Geographic and the History Channel. And in the fourth quarter of 2012, Mary Lee drove like 2 billion earned media impressions. Billion with a B.
Wow.
I'm like, oh, wow, I think there's another path towards scale and value for brands. We can drive the earned media space because we're newsmakers now. Our sharks are newsmakers.
Right.
And if we leverage that properly when they move across various, areas and around cities, all the press wants to cover that. We can push the story forward about the sharks and how they affect the system. And they needed content, and I only gave them brand integrated content so I could leverage the earned media space.
That's what you learned from Offshore Adventures and your other TV shows.
So suddenly we're delivering billions of earned media impressions in stories about saving the ocean for brands,
Wow.
And it's real.
And so that is how you go from bankruptcy at that moment of tagging that last shark to
a new path to build on.
A new path, right? And being self-contained and self-sufficient at that.
And Caterpillar really stepped up right at that moment. And Caterpillar came in and funded our work for 3 years. They, obviously got all the machinery and the vessel just back to A+. It was kind of like, here, we can do one of these 3. This is a great bridge. This is a great brand for thing. It's not a forever thing. We can get you in a good spot and help you bridge this and get your equipment dialed in. And Caterpillar was huge. Wow. We wouldn't have made it through without them. Companies like Costa and Yeti. I mean, back in the day, in the early days of Costa, in our sponsorship agreements, this goes back maybe 15 years ago, our relationship was so deep and intertwined with them. I could call them and be like, oh man, you guys owe me 50 grand in like 60 days, but I'm not going to make payroll next month if I don't have, like 15 grand. Can you float me 15? And they'd be like, sure.
Nice.
Like back when it was old school,
I don't think a lot of people realize that that there's been so much financial turmoil like for this project, and probably millions of times or many times that other people without as much passion for the project might have just quit.
I do say to people, I'm 56 now, and we may get there. I'm very excited about the new global headquarters of OCEARCH that's being built in Jacksonville with Jacksonville University and the city and the state, because one of the big picture losses of the ocean was Cousteau passing and the Cousteau Society not having some sort of plan to continue that.
Right.
And so like the journey I've been on, I've had to make so many personal, irrational financial decisions and decisions like that you wouldn't make if you weren't like so committed that it was irrational. That the third big goal I had was to give it away to the future, which is what's happening in Jacksonville, because you have to be too stupid to do what I've done to be able to survive, to get here. Like, it would be totally understandable that no other person would make those choices and just look after their kid or their family or whatever. And I don't know why I was that way. You have hindsight, right? You get a little older, you look back on yourself as you made it through certain situations. Maybe it was because there was no choice. Like, my choice was forward and make it work or die.
Right. Yeah.
So we just found a way.
Well, often I think that that's where some of the best projects, inventions, whatever, life's work comes from that place.
Yeah, there was really no choice other than to win.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to move forward, even to survive at all, even to survive through the day.
Yeah.
And moving forward and surviving this day allows you another day, and then something happens.
Right.
You tag Mary Lee.
Yeah.
Right? Like, something happens and something changes.
And the challenge here is like just the cost of the ship to just brutal.
Right. I mean, that's a massive ship. How many people can stay on that? Well, you're talking about like
20,
25 or so, 20. And most of those how many of those are scientists?
6.
Okay. So 6 scientists, and then your crew and
content creators, communicators, educators.
Yeah. You got the whole thing wired.
Because what happened was, when we started the tracker, going back to the Mary Lee story, right after we went down and followed Mary Lee there. Then we took the ship there. February that month, we tagged Lydia, 14.5-foot female, like 200 yards in front of the Mayport Poles, right at the mouth of the St. Johns River.
Wow.
And so while I was there on that, because there's no white sharks in Florida. We rolled down there, tagged one, and Mary Lee was there. So it's like, okay, wow, we really don't know what the hell's going on.
Right.
But we got data coming in, And then I went to speak at a school always when we did these expeditions, I'd go a couple of days early, stay a couple of days longer, speak at a half dozen schools. It's all about the kids in the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I went into this classroom in Jacksonville, Florida, and they had a life-size drawing of Mary Lee on the wall.
Wow.
And they had maps, and they were tracking the sharks, and then they had like inches and feet, and she was using the tracker to teach the kids math because she couldn't get them interested in math, but they were crazed about the sharks. So she was using the sharks to teach them all these STEM skills, right. Science and math.
That would have worked for me.
Really working, yeah. And so I was like, man, can I use this? Like, she's like, you won't believe it. The kids are eating it up. So it made so much sense to turn the real-time science into real-time STEM educational curriculums so that kids could follow the sharks and then do math problems, learn physics, oceanography, marine debris.
You have that built out too now?
So I went to Landry's. This goes back 10 years ago. I went to Landry's and told them about it because they had a big educational curriculum team at the Houston Aquarium. And still to this day, they give us their entire curriculum team that writes and updates the 100 lesson plans we have in our free and open sourced educational curriculum that's integrated into the tracker.
Wow.
Landry's and so there's, thousands and thousands of kids around the world using that, and homeschoolers, and, so it's kind of like science in the now, education in the now, exploration in the now. Everyone's in their phone in the now,
Yep. Yeah, I know. And that's a great way to connect with kids. I mean, that would have worked for me for sure, because I did not connect well in school. You probably didn't either. I don't know. We're exactly the same age. When's your birthday?
October 10.
Okay, I'm August 19th, so you got me by a couple of months, but I'm 56 too. And school, back when we went to school, they didn't have a lot of the same things that they have now of like, let's try to find the way that little Tommy works the best. How he works the best. It's like, you're just not getting it, man.
Yeah. Tommy, get outside.
Yeah, go outside. That was fine with me too. I was much happier out there anyway. Let's talk about Florida for a minute. Because you've figured out that there's a lot of white sharks in Florida
in the winter.
What about in the winter? And then they just go somewhere else, and
they go north. They go up and they feed on seals all summer and fall up in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and northeastern United States.
And then through all of your tracking and everything, you're able to watch those do it over and over and over again. What about the other sharks in Florida? I'm sure that you're aware as a fisherman that more people are seeing more sharks in Florida than they've ever seen before.
Well, there's more of everything in Florida than we've ever seen before.
Well, that's something that you wanted to talk about before. So let's talk about that. Like, what's going on? Because there, like when you were talking about scientists and like resentment and resistance to certain things, that seemed to be happening for a long time in Florida. That anglers are telling scientists and other people, even shark people, that, dude, the shark population is off the hook here. It is incredible how many sharks we're seeing in every direction. It doesn't matter where you go, north, south, east, or west. It doesn't matter how far you go. You could be right next to the dock, or you could go out 100 miles. Sharks everywhere. They're eating all the catches.
Wouldn't you say that same thing, generally speaking, about all the fish as well? Like, there's a lot more of everything.
Yeah, no.
There's a lot more tarpon, a lot more snook, a lot more redfish, a lot more everything.
I mean, personally, my feeling as a charter fisherman and a guide is that more sharks is a good thing, because that means there's more of everything. If there wasn't enough food for those sharks to be eating, there wouldn't be sharks.
Yeah,
right?
I think really the sad commentary about it is that as the system recovers in Florida, and both our entire eastern and western coasts are rolling, right? We need to talk about this because it needs to be celebrated, and we'll get to that point at the end of this conversation.
Sure, let's
go. So there's a lot more of everything, and what's interesting, right, is the people who haven't. When I go out fishing in Florida and I see that now, I'm like, oh wow, this is amazing. It's just like what it was like in the Galapagos. This is just like what it was like on the Great Barrier Reef. or on the Ningaloo Reef in Australia, or, at the Revillagigedos. I'm like, you don't have to travel anymore to see a wild ocean.
Mm-hmm.
This is what a wild ocean looks like. And the people who are from there, have been fishing there, unfortunately, grew up in a system that was compromised but healing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So now we're in a system that's what a real wild ocean looks like. When you're fishing in the Galapagos, if you don't get the fish in, you're sharked instantly.
Mm-hmm.
When you're fishing on the Great Barrier Reef, if you don't get the billfish in quickly, you are sharked instantly.
Yep.
Right? This is what a wild ocean looks like. Most people really don't understand kind of the concept of when you see how the fisheries developed so much in Florida over the years, particularly back through the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, and so much of this like light tackle fly fishing type of vibe. That sort of fishing is really only successful in highly compromised systems.
Mm.
Because you don't have the luxury of using that sort of tackle in a truly healthy system, because you're going to get sharked.
Yes. That's so true.
And so when you come up in a system and everyone's going ultra light and they're going, particularly you get people that get so locked in on like, I'm just a fly fisherman.
Right.
Instead of just a fisherman using the appropriate tool for whatever task is before me, right?
Yes.
One is not better than the other. One's just a hammer and one's a screwdriver and one's they're just different tools. And for me, the best fishermen are the people who know how to use the best tools in the best moment for whatever the task at hand is.
That's right.
Not just a specific method. So in particular, where I was in Marco, where a lot of light tackle and fly fishing and stuff like that, it becomes really inconvenient for those people as systems recover. Because the light tackle fishing days are over. You have to gear up or you're going to get sharked. That's what a healthy ocean looks like. So I would say that, people are seeing what things are supposed to look like and they're just not used to it. Like when we travel around the world, we would get sharked all the time. We'd move. We'd shark and move. We shark, we move. It gets sharky, we move. We got to find a different tide. We got to find a different moon phase. We got to find a different time of day, and because that's just part of the system.
Right.
So I know that the conversation is going on. I mean, I'm not, deaf to the whole situation, but people don't really, they talk about the sharks and how many are getting, and I'll ask them some questions. I'm like, well, how's the fishing been? They'll be like, man, the fishing's the best it's ever been in my life.
Yeah.
It's the best it's ever been. I'm like, oh, that's good to hear. I'm like, so do you still run it? I know I can run a third as far and I catch 5 times more. Well, that sounds pretty good. I'm like, how's business? Business fully booked out. Mm-hmm. I'm like, that's great. Well, that's because the fishing's so good. I guess everybody's succeeding. They want to come out like, great. So the sharks, so the sharks are a problem, huh? So it's not really an economic problem. The system's teeming. It's just kind of pissing you off. And so you got to like whine about it. Is that, so are we supposed to like change the ocean because you're, tummy aches? Like figure it out, like be a fisherman.
Right.
Gear up, move.
Well, there is that conversation going on, but then there's another conversation which is puzzling to me, and it has kind of turned in the last year or so, but it's with shark people that are concerned about the global population of sharks, and they just feel like there is no way that a portion of the ocean could see this great, amazing rebound while other parts of the ocean are seeing a big decline. And they just will not even have the conversation with you that the fishing in Florida, or the sharks in Florida are most we've ever seen, right? They won't even have the conversation.
Absolutely. Since probably like the 40s.
Have you seen it? No, never seen it. Well,
yeah, but there's more of everything. There's more whales.
I'm totally 100% with you on that, and we're lockstep in what you're saying. But I'm just trying. It's funny because like you had these resistance moments with other scientists, and there seems to be a similar one of people going, no, you know what? It's just a new baseline. And it's like, and then there'll be these other people that'll say, it's not that there are more sharks. There's just too much fishing and they're coming directly to the boat. And it's like, dude, we'll go 200 miles this way, catch a fish, and go 200 miles the other way and catch a fish and immediately get sharked.
Well, where there's life, there's sharks, right? They're balancing systems everywhere. So if you're on the life, there are going to be sharks there.
Right.
I think the biggest thing is just everyone adjusting to, like, you now have the privilege of operating in a truly wild system that's moving to world-class levels, because the United States is the world leader in recovering our oceans on both our east and west coasts. And so everyone is in the midst of this evolution and experiencing it in their own way. And there's frustrations like, I didn't used to get sharked, but I'm getting sharked. But then they don't think, I used to only get 2 bites and now I'm getting 30.
Right.
And half of them are getting sharked. Like, they're not seeing the whole system coming together, and that the sharks are a part of it, and that everything is way better and their businesses are fine because half their customers love the shark eat, for at least once or twice during the day, and they're fully booked and they're making a great living. So there's no economic impact, like negative economic impact. It's just more like, I don't like it when they eat my fish.
Right.
And so
then the other things is that there's just more predators of all type. There are more Goliath groupers. Like, so you hear that too. Like, between the sharks and the Goliath grouper, I never get a fish in. And that, I get it, right? Like, that could be frustrating, but
there's management, you're allowed to keep a certain number of sharks every day. All of those management things, fall within the science guidelines of sustainable activity that could mitigate some of these issues you're talking about. So, it's not like you got like a shark hugger here who's like, oh, no, it's all just managed just like the redfish,
right?
Just like the snook. It's just most people don't bother to go do it.
Right. And also it could be really frowned upon when you get back to the dock. Like you could kill a tarpon, but when you bring a tarpon back to the dock these days, not good. You're not going to get a good ovation.
It goes back to my old beginnings of Offshore Adventures, right? We got these spaces that are being hijacked by the people who aren't the most passionate, knowledgeable people in the space. And you got, and they're barking about all these things they don't even know about, like fish are people too. I mean, I had to deal with white sharks or people too for a long time, but come on. I thought we were all moving back into the era of a little bit of common sense and a little bit more centrist dispositions. Like, we don't have to talk to people like they're, not normal, rational, reasonable people. 1 + 1 is 2, right? We know we can catch these amount and it's fine. I mean, look at the management of the East Coast and the management of Florida. I think is the world leader. I had a meeting about a month ago with some FWC scientists down in St. Petersburg. And I was on the phone with them and I said to him, hey, before we start this meeting, I just wanted to say, hey, guys, good job, guys. Like, holy cow. From when I was a kid fishing in the 70s and the 80s when it was a disaster. I mean, there was great fishermen like you who could still go get them, right? But for the normal family to go out in 1984 to catch a big snook was virtually impossible. Guys like you could get them, but not mom and dad and their kid or a couple of teenagers, who were just trying to figure it out. To where we are, where anybody can catch 10 snook under the dock next door.
Yep.
Or there was no redfish in Marco Island in the 80s. None.
Right. I mean, you're exactly right, and it was what you brought up earlier is the netting for mullet when everyone got together and stopped that. That
was a component of it, a big component of it,
part of it. But that kind of what you've said a couple of times here is if you allow, take the pressure off of whatever is causing this decline and allow the ocean to heal itself, it will.
That's right, and those are the sharks.
Yeah.
So, like when you're around your reefs and stuff, if there's no sharks, the little fish that pick at the reef, they overharvest the reef and the reef dies. If the shark's there, they got to hide half the day and they can only come out at night and then everything flourishes. Just like the wolf in Yellowstone pushes the deer to have to bed down instead of overgrazing all day and the forest comes back. The white shark is the wolf. Right. And so as we see these things emerging, what's happening is we're just coming back into like a truly wild ocean. I mean, think about the days we just talked about in the 80s where there was very few boats out and you couldn't catch.
Right.
And then you flash forward to today where there's 1,000 times more pressure on the water, boats everywhere, and everyone's catching. And they're getting shark some.
Yeah.
I think our biggest problem is a lack of perspective. because they just don't remember where we've come from, because they've just been fishing for the last 20 years or the last 15 years.
Or since COVID, right?
Or since COVID, yeah. You're going to get sharked, man. You're in a healthy ocean. That's fantastic, And if you get frustrated by it, move. Mm-hmm. Switch it up. Go for a swim.
What do you know about this Shark Act and this legal kind of attempt to kind of what are they saying, like limit human interaction with depredation or something like that, which sounds sketchy to me. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, so the Shark Act that act itself is just an act to create a body to collect data.
Okay.
So it's not like an act, like a new regulation type act, right? It's just we're going to get some people to come together and we're going to study this problem. Mm-hmm. So I work a lot with ASA. I love ASA. I collaborate with them on many different policies and different things. OCEARCH did not participate in the Shark Fin Ban Act or the Shark Act, simply because in the Shark Fin Ban Act, I had my scientists evaluated. It was going to result in an incremental 4 million sharks being killed a year. Because we were not accepting the sharks off super sustainable commercial fisheries where they're using the whole fish. So the supply was getting diverted to the illegal finners out of Spain.
Wow.
Right. It was just stupid.
Right.
Like one of these things where it says it's helping the sharks, but it's really undermining. Ultimately, we negotiated hard and we got these sustainable commercial fisheries exempted so they can monetize their fins after they sell the whole fish, which is really their profit, right, their life, So we worked to get some exemptions in because we wouldn't support it. Right. Again, it's just politics is a crazy thing. You'll have an act that has a title and it absolutely undermines the very thing that it says.
Well, I know. And I think a lot of people have experienced that and are very skeptical about, it sounds nice. It's got a good
check
name.
In with OCEARCH's position on any. Yeah. If you start to feel that way on anything, see what OCEARCH's position is on it. Because ours is just going to be the data.
Right to your website or to the app or where?
Yeah, pretty much. If it's a big issue, the social handles, you'll see our disposition on it, we're a data-driven centrists, mm-hmm. and we're not. I think we're the last non-woke nonprofit in the global ocean space, man.
Is it hard to stay that way? Like,
not hard for me. It's hard to survive that way.
Yeah,
but it's not hard to stay that way.
Right. But do you feel pressure? Have you felt the pressure?
Oh, I've got lots of phone calls from all angles. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, it's just like, what's ocean first? What's shark first? What's the data say? There's the answer.
Right.
There's no like, I'll do it for you.
Right.
No, it's like our great grandkids got no more time for that kind of crap. That's what got us in this spot. Now we're coming out, right? So we're coming out. There's just much to celebrate, but a few people are frustrated and but it's not, I don't have a guy coming to me saying, I can't charter my boat. I can't get anybody who wants me to take him fishing because of the sharks. They're all fully booked.
Yeah.
So there's no economic hardship going down. So I'm sorry if your belly aches a little bit, but, man up. You can't. Sometimes, there's people who fish all over the world and we're always moving. Right. So they're just adapting to whatever they're dealt with all the time. And there's people who run out of the same place and do the same thing all the time. This is very disruptive to the people who run out of the same place and do the same thing every time, because it forces them to evolve as a fisherman.
Right.
It forces them to learn more. It forces them to elevate their game because the system has become a more complex challenge.
That's right.
So I would encourage them to embrace that versus whine about the sharks, because the sharks are the reason the fishing's so good.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So one of the things to celebrate is you broke ground on this.
I haven't broke ground yet.
Oh, well, the dock is done, right?
That's right. Yeah, the dock is done. Yes. Okay, so yes, I'm sorry. You're right.
Tell me about what your vision for the headquarters is and where this moves you in the future. And I'm assuming that, from all the conversation we've had so far, is this is your plan for the future where Cousteau didn't have one.
this is giving OCEARCH away to the future so it can transcend any individual's lifespan. Yeah, this is the institutionalization of OCEARCH, which I thought I was going to be scrapping to do, like on my deathbed, And really great story, when Mary Lee and Lydia came down to, Florida down there. It really opened up that Florida was a huge part of this puzzle. And, I knew that as OCEARCH was growing, the science component was growing so much that I was either going to have to build an institution or partner with one. And I had, I'm a fisherman really in the beginning, more of a social entrepreneur or whatever. And I didn't want to build an institution. So it was clear that Jacksonville was a critical area. We developed a relationship with Jacksonville University, and it became the academic home of OCEARCH.
Nice.
And so we started to keep all of our samples there and started taking a lot of their students out. Like, this is one of the places where a student can go for a marine biology degree, and they're like tagging white sharks.
Nice.
That began to develop over time, and I started doing more speaking in Jacksonville, and I spoke at an event, and this gentleman, I spoke about OCEARCH and a vision for bringing the world-class practical and the academic together to radically accelerate data collection to ensure, that our kids see an ocean full of fish, and the vision for that and how OCEARCH had been executing it over the years. And he was a city councilman for Mayport, this Mayport area in Jacksonville. And he said, Chris, I heard you're trying to get a headquarters going. The people at JU had mentioned it to me. I said, yes, sir. We've never had a home. We've been wandering around the world's oceans for 15 years. And my guys, they're like living on ships, and, they're going to want a home too one day. And he said, well, I think it should be in Mayport. I think Mayport should do that for you, and we should build you a dock in Mayport. And we have a piece of land down here for you. I think that would be perfect for it. So they rented us an old house and a barn at first. It was right adjacent to a big 2-acre plus lot. And this goes back years. And so we kind of began using that barn to store things and using the dock. They built a $6 million dock for us. It's like a wharf.
Wow.
And then they leased us, they're leasing us the land there for like $1 a year for 30 years, one of those things. And so we had this kind of shaping up, operating out of the old house, this empty lot with this lift. And I got a call from a state senator in Florida. And he said, Chris, I hear OCEARCH is trying to get something going with the people down in Mayport. I said, yes, sir. We got a dock here. We're operating out of this own house. It's, it's a thrill. We're figuring it out over time. We're creeping along. He said, I think the state of Florida should build you a world-class OCEARCH headquarters, and you should serve all the students here in Florida and take them out. And how about if we start working on a program to help the state come together with the city, with the universities, and we build a world-class research institution, on the St. Johns River in Mayport, Florida. Wow. And I was like, man, this is like a dream. I can't believe I'm getting this phone call right now.
That is awesome.
And so that's been a few years ago, and, that we keep working with them, and they continue to do the funding, and we'll be, the permitting has been very difficult because it's along the St. Johns River there. I think we'll have our last permit to break ground early next year. And it'll be a full exhibit, white shark exhibit, and also interactive for the kids to learn how the local ecosystem works with the lab as a component. So the lab is the front of the house, so the kids will see all the science. Necrops facilities, so kids and students and the public can see the animals necrops eat, and it'll be beamed all over for educational stuff. A vessel maintenance facility, and then a residence for 16 visiting students or 16 visiting scientists, along with the residents for the crew there. And it'll be, the world's leading great white shark research station in the world, studying the only winter habitat in the world where people can study white sharks, which is off of Florida. Wow. We can study white sharks from December through May right out of Jacksonville.
Yeah. And that's what I was seeing too, is that instead of long expeditions, you can now go day trips like a regular charter trip. Basically.
Well, yeah. So what's happened since that time is, the ship is very slow. We move around at 8 knots. You got to get 20 people coming together on it. So it's like a big deal when you get together for a big expedition. And in particularly Northeast Florida in the wintertime, the weather windows are so short and chopped up that this is really an approach that we've been struggling with for the last several years. So we've developed a new boat It's actually a 70-foot catamaran with a lift in the middle of it.
Oh, wow.
And the state of Florida just funded the building of this new vessel last year. And so that's being built to where we'll have a vessel stationed there that's got its own custom lift in the, like a big catamaran with a lift in the middle. You can visualize that. I should have sent you a picture.
Yeah.
And that will run 25 knots. So you'll be able to go hit a 2-day weather window that's 50 miles off the beach and actually, have it work for you. With the ship, by the time we get there and set up, the window's closing down on us.
Right.
So that is the approach in this region across the winter, is to use a vessel that's much more agile, can go fish a 2-day weather window or a 1-day weather window. And then ultimately the ship, there's 9 white shark puzzles around the world. And we've taken the East Coast population and taken it from one of the least understood to by far the most comprehensively understood in less than 10 years.
Wow.
So if the ship really could move around and help these other 9 populations get to where we are. Because one of the big concerns that I have, that I've shared recently with some people on Capitol Hill, is, our oceans off our East Coast are teeming with life at levels we haven't seen since the 40s. I mean, it is just like, when I had that meeting with FWC and I said, hey, great job, you guys. He said, Chris, thanks for noticing. Like, no one gets it. He goes, did you know that there's not one species of fish that FWC is responsible for managing that is in an overfished condition? Not one.
Wow.
Said the only fish in Florida that are in a state of overfished is ones that they're forced to co-manage with NOAA because they move and they're more federally managed. But all the state game fish, not one species as of 1 month ago, is in an overfished category, which is
the red snapper would be one of the other ones that
the red snapper, but that's a NOAA FWC co-managed thing.
Right.
So that's a whole nother debacle. So anyways, we're in the middle of the great return to abundance, and most people don't even know it's occurring. But when you go to the other side of the Atlantic, we worked over in Spain, France, and Ireland this past summer. It is completely decimated. Yeah. There are no fish. It is like the Med. The Med is dead.
Yeah. And even if you go, like we did a sailing trip down in the British Virgin Islands, and the water's beautiful. You go jump in and you look around and you're like, there is nothing here. There are no fish. There's no sharks. You see some tarpon around your boat at night with the lights and stuff, but for the most part, nothing. No bait fish, no little reef fish. So what I was going to ask you about that earlier is, like, is that because the sharks have gone away and
well, it's because of all of it's gone away, but the sharks are a component of helping that rebuild whenever it's given some time, because they'll make sure it comes back in the most efficient balanced system with maximum abundance that it can carry.
How can that happen when you're dealing with foreign countries and other?
So this is you're walking right into it. So I'm really concerned that people are going to have to come steal our fish. I'm very concerned for our U.S. food security. Yeah. Because when you go over and spend, I've had the privilege of completing 48 expeditions around the world. I've seen it all. I have seen pristine waters. I have seen decimated waters. And Europe is decimated. The other side of the Atlantic Ocean is decimated. And everyone knows the Med is dead. Right. What they don't talk about is that just wraps around up the Atlantic seaboard. And, they're talking about 30 by 30, and they're talking of their politicians say all these things. Meanwhile, they're still gill netting and dragging the place like they're doing things we banned 30 years ago. Yeah. And so this is a big food security issue, because when the rest of the world gets fished out, they're going to be coming for our fish, because our place is teeming, both coasts. Mm-hmm. And so, I have been engaging with some politicians in conversations recently where I'm saying, hey, why aren't we have a playbook now on how to recover an ocean on the East Coast and the West Coast. We know how to do it. Why aren't we taking that playbook around the world? You don't need a bunch of science. All you got to do is follow this playbook. And that can just shorten the cycle on things. We made these 6 major moves over 30 years. If you make them all, I think you can recover your system in 10 or 12 years instead of 30. We strung them out over 30 years as we learned. But, you do these 6 things right now in 10 years, it's going to blow your mind what you see here. And why can't we leverage our economic relationships with these countries and say, hey, if you're not going to manage your system back to abundance, it's going to impact our financial relationship with your country. Because if you don't start fixing your waters now, you're going to be coming to steal my fish later. And I'm not down with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is what I've been trying to find the right people to talk to about this issue, whether it's being some sort of, it's just, everybody can dream, right? Like the ambassador of the ocean for Florida, and take what Florida's the world leader. Why isn't Florida leading the world back to abundance? All we have to do is unleash FWC's vast knowledge and experience in these other parts of the world to advise people on how to bring their ocean back, and it will come back. It's just a matter of whether they have the political will to do it, or they can fight through whatever corruption they're currently dealing with.
Right.
So number one, the United States needs to be celebrated as the world leader in recovering an ocean, because we get crapped on all the time, and it's just not true. Number two, we need to share that with other people because it's in our own best interest, so that our kids are guaranteed, food security and an operating ocean for generations. So I think there's a real opportunity with this point we're at right now to share that story. I feel like OCEARCH is in a unique position because we have the street cred in the fishing community because we come from them. We now have over 100 peer-reviewed science papers, so we have the street cred in the science community, and we can bring these two communities together that have lacked trust and a common vision in a way that a lot of other organizations can't, because we can talk straight to both communities, and we have some, reasonable experience and credibility in those spaces.
Right.
And so I'm hoping this all comes together to become like the 800-pound gorilla in the middle of the ocean conversation, to make sure it's driven by data and commonsensical moves rather than emotion and, irrational dispositions.
Wow.
So that's
crazy. That's crazy position you find yourself in, really. It's a position full of opportunity and hope, and but then you just got to get people to listen.
Fortunately, the white shark does that.
Yeah, I know. Right.
The white shark is the gateway to radical scale around this conversation and our open sourced approach, because it's created a massive community. We have over 20 billion earned media impressions a year, and millions and millions, hundreds of millions online, and it's not because of us; it's because of the white shark.
Right.
It's just.
If you were talking about a snail darter or a pilchard.
But why can't we leverage the lion? We can leverage the lion to save the Serengeti. Why can't we leverage the white shark to save the ocean? It's the same thing.
I think you're well on your way, man. I really do.
One thing I want to talk about with you, though, that I think there's more opportunity. I know this is going on long, but
it's good.
One of the big hopes and dreams in the beginning when OCEARCH began was this, coming out of Offshore Adventures. There's a lot of leaders in the space, from a fishing standpoint. And all we did was come together with scientists to make sure we got the best data. If you really look forward, and where I hope OCEARCH can drive us, is the transfer of this model to all species. Why aren't our best redfish charter boat captains taking our scientists out when they need to collect their data? The scientists have no boats, no money, and don't know how to catch. The fishermen have the boats, have the money, and know how to catch, especially if we bring the industry in. Right. So why aren't everyone understands that Ducks Unlimited save the ducks. Everyone gets that Trout Unlimited save the trout. Why would we expect anyone other than the recreational fishermen, the professional fishermen, to save the fish in the ocean? Right. But right now, I felt like when I started, and it's better now, but they've almost been excluded from the process.
They have been excluded.
Right. So what OCEARCH is the changing of the guard in that area, is that we need the fishermen and the scientists coming together to get the best data sets as soon as we can, to affect policy as soon as we can. And if we'd have done that, we wouldn't be in this redfish debacle.
That's right.
Right? These scientists that you understand, they get on these boats and they go out, and it's just someone who knows how to run the boat. And they're like, well, where do you want to go?
Right.
And the scientist is telling the guy who knows how to run a boat but doesn't know how to fish where to go. And then they don't get any. Meanwhile, they're right over there, and you and your buddies they're coming over the rail faster than you can bait a hook. Right. And so it's like we're not on a common team here. Right. And our great grandkids got no more time for this silliness. Right. So my dream is to be able to take where we were at Offshore Adventures, what we've built in the science space with OCEARCH, and now spend more time in the fishing space, more time with the manufacturers at ICAST and NMMA and ASA, and say, okay, why don't we, with all of our fleet of pros, become the people who lead the path to abundance by serving the scientists in all these realms to make sure they have the best data as soon as possible, and us take control of that trajectory.
Yeah.
Much how OCEARCH has done that in the global white shark space, just kind of like on our own to try to prove it was a model that works.
Right.
And we've accelerated the rate of learning 30 to 50 fold. Just by common sense. Let's get our best fishermen, taking our best scientists to get our best data. Like, this is not rocket science. What it is getting rid of all the bullshit and just doing what we need to do for our grandchildren.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well,
it's not more complicated than that. So I've been trying to speak to more people like you and more to try to get some energy behind this conversation. Particularly, you need the groups like ASA and CCA to be behind it, and the National Marine Manufacturers Association, because the companies like the Costas and the Yetis and the Yamahas and the Contenders and the other boat manufacturers that are all so fantastic, and engine manufacturers as well, should really be leading the path to abundance by providing the scientists opportunity to get data they cannot get on their own.
Right.
And so how do we scale it?
Yeah. All those people that you mentioned understand that and feel that way and want to lead the charge to protecting the ocean, leading back to
they love it the most.
Yeah, because without abundance, nobody's buying your motors, nobody's buying your boats, nobody's
chartering the captain.
Nobody's chartering the captain. But the captains have been excluded from this. I know that there have been lots of things that have gone on where concerned anglers and guides and captains have raised concerns, and they're met with, you guys don't know what you're talking about. Like,
they're
probably not going to say you don't know what you're talking about, but who knows more about what you're talking about than someone that fishes 300 days a year? Who knows more than
So this is a different problem. This is a problem that I hope is changing now, and I talk about, right, in OCEARCH's journey, the single most uncelebrated person who's had the most impact is Captain Brett McBride.
Mm-hmm. There
is no tag on a white shark if him and his team don't succeed. Don't do what no one's ever done before in a place where no one's ever done it. And so you'll see at OCEARCH and in this new headquarters, the celebration of fishermen and the trades blended with the scientists, equally admired and revered, because equally as important to getting us toward the solution. So as we create a conversation going forward, number one, fishermen, look, I'm a fisherman, but fishermen are some of the biggest bellyacre whiners in the world everywhere you go. I mean, that's just the truth. We may as well face up to that.
Okay.
So now, but we can impact things. We can get involved. We need to get receptive science teams around projects and really work with the federal and state agencies to be a solution for them. There's responsibility on both sides to come together. Mm-hmm. And what we were trying to do at OCEARCH is to prove it's possible. Like when you're on the OCEARCH deck, you got the scientists and the fishermen at an equal level, both learning from each other. You'd be stunned at how many science projects have come from the conversations from the fishermen, because they're like, well, you know what I'm seeing out here every day? Is this, that, and the other? And then they're like, oh, that's a question I didn't even know to ask.
Right.
As a scientist. And then we help them do a project and get the answer. Right. So when you bring this practical and academic together, it's super powerful.
Yeah.
And so you just got to find that environment of mutual respect and let go of things and look forward. And, I hope that OCEARCH can pull that off in the midst of the other things we're doing along the way, because until we know that the future of the ocean is in the hands of the people who love it the most, at least, we won't know it's secure.
Right.
And no one loves the ocean more than recreational fishermen and, charter captains and those people they love it the most.
Right.
And they want their kids to be able to see it. And they use it every day and they know what's going on. So
but they're also not afraid to give their time to that. Like Precisely. Guides, charter fishermen, avid anglers aren't afraid to donate their time to take a scientist with them or to just bring one on a charter. Like, just sit on the cooler.
Yeah, we'll tag every redfish we catch today.
Everything we get, right?
Yeah.
People are willing to do that. I think that there would be, but that opportunity has not really existed in a way that there's any trust in that circle.
Right.
Like, what are you going to do with it? If I take you out and we tag all these fish that you didn't even know were here, maybe next week I'm not even going to be able to go here.
Yeah, but in that suspicion, that's not even a fair question to ask. I mean, look at the water today. You're going out today; it's thriving.
Right.
Right. So, it's not going to be shut down.
Right.
All we're going to be able to do is fine tune it more.
But there's always going to be that distrust between the two groups until they're brought together with, and what you have available to you is that you have laid out a foundation of how this can happen with the white sharks. And if it can happen with the white sharks, it can happen with a bonefish or a permit or a tarpon or a redfish or a snook or a red snapper. Like, it can happen. And these two groups can come together to make everything better. And
Precisely.
And I think that you would have great reception for that. I would tell you that I would be more than happy to help with something like that.
Yeah. So now we just got to get the systems, connect the dots,
right.
And so I think that there's an opportunity for us to really shift into a leadership position as a community. And I think it's something that, we need to continue to try to move in that direction. And one of the ways to do that is me communicating with you about it right now, and just getting a conversation going across the community, across the academic community. Cause I know the guys over at Marineland who are trying to tag, snook and redfish. And, and if they want to tag 200, if you took them out, you would take them 4 times. If they go out by themselves, they're going to have to go 30.
Right. Yeah.
So, the cost of getting the data and the amount of data that's accessible in a shorter period of time radically affects outcomes. So, we need to keep moving toward that, but we also need to get the energy of the industry behind it.
Yeah.
And how are they defining themselves? Yeah.
They will get behind it.
I hope that OCEARCH can lead in that, because I do feel a little bit like I disappeared from my blood brothers. Offshore Adventures, we're all together for 10 years. We're all climbing the same mountain. And then all of a sudden I had this opportunity to maybe try to become the ocean explorer and leverage that as to make a bigger impact than just fishermen. Which is what I was going for, because the space was open, like Cousteau had left and there was no one. And here we had this unique opportunity and a glimmer of hope at making a global impact. And we have done everything we can to pursue that. And I hope that I can kind of re-enter the fishing space with all my friends, and then I'll have them be like, where you been, man? I've been trying to survive.
2 billion earned media impressions. Everybody knows where you've been. You're going to be welcomed back to the fishing world. You haven't left the fishing world. You've just been doing it differently. And you've been doing it not for necessarily a paycheck. You've been doing it for your grandchildren and their children. And that's going to get a lot of respect. And
we can do it. We're winning, bro.
You are winning.
Well, I mean, all of us are winning.
Yes.
I mean, look at our oceans. That's the one thing we need to celebrate, especially our kids. Everyone, in the nonprofit space, it's all doom and gloom because this cash flows when the sky is falling. Right. And it is not accurate. Our children should be excited about their future. They should be excited about starting a family or starting a business. I speak to all these kids in universities and high schools all the time. And all this, the sky is falling and the world is going to end, is devastating them.
Yes.
They're not dreaming about the world's going to end anyway.
Right.
No, it's not, man. We're winning. And we need people to know that. Like, our coasts are teeming with life. We are the model for the world. If you didn't fish in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, you're lucky. You didn't have to fish through those 30 years of your journey on this planet, because the fishing was nothing like now. We had a fraction of the pressure, and the fishing was much tougher.
Yeah.
And so it's an exciting time, and people should be excited about the future, but there's opportunities to make it even brighter by taking advantage of some of these incremental opportunities to just bring people together on a common vision of, anything's possible if you don't care who gets the credit.
Right.
It's like fish sandwiches for our kids.
That's right.
That it's really all comes down to that in the end. And in that conversation, there is no me and you, there's just us.
Right.
And what are we going to do about it? And so I hope we can, with the facility coming into Jacksonville and, moving there full time, kind of re-engaging, we can get this whole recreational fishing economy, which is now bigger than the commercial economy. Wasn't back then.
Yeah.
And leverage that economic kind of capacity to drive policy toward abundance and have it be led by the recreational fishing community, so they know and trust why it's happening and where it's coming from, and then their children do the same thing. That's
I love it, man.
Hold that off.
If there's anything about that statement that you just made that I love the most, is optimism and realism about what is actually going on out there. And the doom and gloom is poison. It is poison to the young people who might want to be a fishing guide, right? Like, it's never been this bad. Like, all I hear about the good old days. Like, it's like, dude,
yeah. Meanwhile, you call a good guide.
You're in the good old days, right?
Yeah, right. I mean,
it can only get better, or it can get better, not only get better.
And you probably know better than me when you call some of these, really good guides down in Florida, and you want to go fishing for a day. You either have to book it a few years in advance or wait for someone to pass away.
Yeah, a lot of them you do.
That's how good it is.
Yeah.
And we just don't step back and kind of realize that. And we do have some challenges, but we have much to celebrate as well.
Yeah. I love the celebration because, you've done some really cool stuff with OCEARCH, and honestly, I would say that maybe, in my opinion, after this conversation, the tagging of the great whites and getting the information off the great whites has been that's been a real accomplishment. There's no doubt about it. But bringing these two communities of the anglers and the scientists together, and then building out this whole platform of education and using the white shark to bring attention to what you're doing that's the big accomplishment in my mind. That's the one that's going to live.
Yeah. I think the most ironic thing about the whole thing is, Brett and I, we're not shark guys at all.
You don't even want to be doing
it. We're abundance guys.
There's got to be something amazing about holding that hand line when there's a 4,000 pound. You're a fisherman, dude. Tell me about the strength of that fish, though. That is it's amazing. That's the apex predator.
So this is a story about the practical and the academic coming together. After Mary Lee came down to Jacksonville and we tagged Lydia in January of 2013, I had some of the scientists from SeaWorld come out on the boat to meet with the scientists that we were working with, and I introduced them to Brett. And so we have all these amazing conversations on the ship that are I'm communicating with the fishermen and the scientists, understanding their objectives, understanding our assets, trying to get everything to come together to accomplish the task safely, right? Every once in a while, the guys will be talking to me from the fishing side, and they'll say, hey, this is going on. And I'll be like, hey, I'll bring them over to the scientists. Like, hey, science guys, I don't really know what's going on here, but my guys are seeing this with the white shark every time they deal with it. What's this all about? And so he started to say things like, I've noticed that if I put a lot of pressure on the sharks and I get in a lead on them, they'll just kind of quit. You get any big fish in a lead, you have control over it, right? And so they don't have reverse and this, that, and the other. And the scientists are like, oh yeah, that's learned helplessness. We use that in the aquariums all the time. When the sharks don't feel like they can get away or restrained, their natural instinct is to just give up. Like a baby, when you swaddle it, it just gives up. That's called learned helplessness. So sharks have this thing called learned helplessness. So then all of a sudden you unleash the concept of learned helplessness in the mind of Brett McBride and handling a 4,000-pound white shark, and it completely changes the game. Suddenly you're going from catching a 4,000-pound white shark in an hour to like 16 minutes.
What?
We're catching 1,000-pound white sharks in 6 minutes, right? Because the less time on the hook, the lower the stress, the better the science results for baseline studies and things. So when you see the practical and the academic collide like that, and it makes an incremental leap forward in the process, you know you're in that right environment of a common vision and mutual success. And so in reality now, when we catch these white sharks have a concept called learned helplessness. And if you can help them understand very quickly that they have no chance of getting away, they will just give up and do whatever you ask them to do. And you can walk them like a dog on a loose leash.
So how do you do that with the buoys?
We're using heavy hand lines, hand lines and buoys. Right. And so once that shark picks up a bait, we will actually go up and grab the buoys trailing behind the shark and not put any pressure on the shark. Have the shark not even know we're there.
Yeah.
And then if the ship is, say, a quarter mile off to the starboard side or whatever, we'll put a little bit of pressure on the hook and the shark will go into a slow turn, and then we'll let off and we'll let it swim all the way back to the boat on its own power most of the time. So it doesn't even really know it's hooked yet.
Right.
Then when we get close, we'll pick up the rest of the line. We'll get in front of the shark and put tremendous pressure on it, and it'll try to pull and move away. But once we got in a lead, it can't go anywhere. And after a few minutes, they just give up.
Wow.
And then we can get the buoys down real close to their nose so they can't dive, right? Once you have a fish pinned to the surface of the water with a buoy, you can do anything with it. And then we walk it back and swing it into the lift and pick it up and do our work there. So it's really more about boat driving and hand lining than fishing. It's really more like teaching a dog how to heel than catching a fish or breaking a horse.
Right.
It's more like that than fishing.
Yeah. I could see that. On this new boat, the one thing I wanted to ask you, the new boat that you have that's got the lift in the middle, is that advantageous? Is it going to create any problems, like getting the shark? I mean, I'm sure that the lift is for the shark, right?
Well, now you can just keep the boat in forward and pull the shark right, suck it right up and in.
And so
with a big cat head at the
cat
front.
is high enough that you can just take the boat right through the cat and pull the shark onto the lift?
You pull the fish, you pull the fish right up into the back of the cat, lift it up to deck height, do the work, drop it back out the back.
Okay. All right.
And then we're going to be able to help all the turtle people.
I see. It's on the back of the
stern,
boat, in the middle.
In the middle.
And you said the middle of the boat. I saw it.
Aft.
I envisioned it as in the middle, actually.
Aft middle, open to the back.
Yeah. Okay. That makes all the sense in the world.
Right. Suck it right in there, pick it up, drop it right out. It allows us to work in heavier seas because the ship doesn't move, but the seas move on the lift. In this boat, everything will be rising and falling together. It's going to allow us to help all the turtle people look at giant turtles they've never been able to look at, all the big manta ray people, rescue manatee. There'll be a 45-foot version that can slip in the skinny water and pick up manatees and dolphins and bring them back. And I think we're hoping that in the future, that we can help a little bit more in the rescue and rehab side of things along while we're doing our work, because we got the boats and the practical knowledge.
Right.
And then also the chief scientist of OCEARCH, Dr. Harley Newton, is a veterinarian. So we're already assisting FWC and stuff when they get a lot of unique animals that get stranded or whatever, and they don't have anyone with the specialty to figure out what's wrong with that animal. We send our chief veterinarian, Dr. Harley Newton, to assist. So when you see all these fish swimming in circles and other things going on, we're very quiet in the background because other people want to take the lead, but some of the science expertise is being loaned to those programs from OCEARCH.
Dang, man, you guys got a lot going on, and
it's when that place is done, dude, it's gonna be the greatest place in the world. We are gonna create the greatest, most practically skilled marine biologists in the world, cranking out of Florida, so that we have scientists that have the capacity to look after the future.
Yeah, it's so exciting for somebody that thinking about going into that line of work, because like a marine biologist, I don't know, like that would be such a stretch to think that you were going to tag white sharks, or that you were going to, I don't know, tag
any shark.
Thousands of fish or thousands of sharks, right? Like the only person I know is tagging thousands of sharks is somebody out there fishing for them every single day. Right? Like the scientists are getting a couple here and there. Like we've talked that.
But you'll see there, we'll be running a boat out and we'll be carrying one day 6 scientists from some senior scientists with 6 students from JU, and then 6 students from UNF and FAU. And we support 12 institutions in Florida.
Nice.
So, it's one of the things at OCEARCH is we don't want to hoard this capacity for any individual group to leverage it to get ahead of the others. This is all rise with the tide, right? So the more gifted people we have from more institutions doing great things, the better off the future is. And so we'll be serving the entire state of Florida and the Eastern Seaboard, and JU will be where it's kind of headquartered out of, and out of Mayport there. So it's an exciting time. It's going to be a few more years, but it's already been 30. What's a few more?
You can do it, man. You can do it. I'll tell you what, when it comes to, uniting these communities of the angling community and the scientists, I don't know what kind of help you need, but I just really like the vision that you laid out, and I could be completely in support of it. So if I can help you. Yeah,
let's get a group of captains and a group of scientists come together for a fun day, maybe fishing somewhere on a, somewhere simple, not out in the, like catching bass or something.
Sounds like Jacksonville, maybe.
Yeah. We'll do it out of JU.
Okay. All right, man. Well, Chris, this has been a great catch up with you, and man, kudos to you and all this hard work and just the dedication for sticking with it, man, because you've obviously had a lot of ups and downs that honestly from the outside, I didn't see that. And I'm
hoping to finish on a high.
Yeah, you're going. But if you're, if you're not one of the 2 billion people that knows about OCEARCH or, has the app, I would definitely strongly suggest getting the app, following on social media. Everything's at OCEARCH, right, Chris?
Yeah.
Okay.
At OCEARCH.
At OCEARCH, and we'll have all that in the notes. And love to have you back on anytime you want, man. You're got an open invitation. Anything you want to talk about?
Appreciate it. Yeah, one little factoid for all those out there that don't know what OCEARCH is. OCEARCH is just ocean and research pushed together. OCEARCH.
Got it.
Thanks for having me, man.
Hey, thank you, Chris.
I enjoyed catching up a lot. I hope to see you in person sometime before too long.
We'll do it. Thank you.
Cheers.
Yep.